is to get where? Ahead. Past the person in front of us. And a lot of times we don't care whose turn it is. In the world we live in today, it's survival. It's dog eat dog. It's, sadly to say, all about me. And if I step on your toes, Bridget, I'm sorry, but I got to get where I'm going. So, John and James wanted to get ahead. They weren't asking, remember this, Jesus to be chummy and sit closer to them. This was not a request for relationship. This was a request for power. And they wanted to be at the very tip top of the food chain. And Jesus said, you don't know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup that I drink? Or be baptized with the baptism which I am baptized with? Jesus wanted them to understand that in the kingdom, in his kingdom, the positions of power didn't come to family or to social connections. Jesus wanted them to understand that it cost to have a place at his table. And to ask for a place of honor in his kingdom, that was also another request. And it was a request to share in his suffering, since one is so connected to the other. Think about what Paul says in the book of Romans, where he says, now if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. You don't know what you're asking, boys, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? And what is their answer? We can. Are ye able, said the Master, to be crucified with me? Yea, the sturdy dreamers answered, to the death we follow thee. How many of y'all know that hymn? Great, great, great old hymn. Well, in this case, Jimmy and Johnny, those were the dreamers. We can do it. We can do it. And Jesus said, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with, but to sit at my right hand or my left hand, that's not for me to grant. Those places belong to those for whom they've been prepared. Jesus tried desperately to explain that the positions of honor in the kingdom were not his to give. God has had many, many, many worthy servants over the ages. Some of them we knew. Some of them I know. But most of them we know nothing about, because they're in all parts of his creation. But Christ does indicate, if you read it, that there are places of honor reserved for those who serve him. You know, we laugh. In my family, we talk about there are going to be jewels in your crown. I don't know how many of you all use that term, you know, every now and then. But somebody will do something, there are going to be jewels in your crown. There will be a place of honor for those who serve him. And we should never think that any service, no matter how great it is or how small it is, any service we do, thinking about Christ and his love is in vain. It's not. You, my friends, every one of you, will have a place at the banquet table. Now, it's really interesting what happens next in this text. The other 10, how does it strike them? Not so good. In fact, it says, the word, my translation I'm using this morning, says they became indignant. One translation says they were really furious when they learned of James and John's private attempt to gain preferential treatment in the kingdom. And we read, when the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Perhaps they were upset, not because, pay attention here, not because they thought that James and John's request was unfair. But do you suppose just maybe, they had exactly the same ambitions as Jimmy and Johnny did. Jimmy and Johnny just had the chutzpah to go and ask. These aren't saints, my friends. These are human beings. They're just exactly like us. You know, they weren't motivated out of goodness. They were motivated by selfish ambitions, possibly. And isn't it odd how sometimes we judge others? We judge each other more harshly than we judge ourselves for exactly the same sins. The anger of those other 10 may not have been motivated by the injustice of James and John. It may and probably was motivated by jealousy. Jesus had a problem on his hands. He had a real problem. So what does he do? He calls them together and he begins to re-emphasize the meaning of greatness. And he contrasts greatness in this world, positions of power, elegant houses, expensive cars, fat bank accounts. He contrasts all that with greatness in God's eyes and in God's kingdom. And he says, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now, it's terribly superfluous for me to even say that service is at the heart, the very core, the essence of Jesus' teaching. His incarnation, his coming to earth in human flesh, was a most powerful demonstration of that truth. His death, which he had just predicted, was a demonstration of all that. And as he himself put it, greater love has no man than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. What else did Jesus do to prove his servanthood? The King, the Son of God, what does he do? He washes his disciples' feet. You know, the Son of the Creator of the universe stoops down and becomes a human being and becomes a foot washer. This is humility and greatness at its utmost height. Jesus himself is the supreme example of what he calls us to be. In humble, lowly form, he came into this world. And it wasn't so that he could be elevated and made ruler over the whole Roman world. He came to suffer and to die. Isaiah told us about it. The whole Old Testament talks about it from point to point. He didn't have to do it, but he did. And he demonstrated greatness in his continual, never-ending service to humanity. And you know what? That's what Jesus looks at us today and says, can you, will you do that for me? Christ, my friends, is looking for people whose strongest desire in the world is to serve him. That's what he's looking for. And there are all sorts of ways to serve. One of the easiest, one of the most spontaneous, is just very simple, unplanned acts of kindness. Now, there are other ways that are much more complicated and everything and require much more courage. But think about life. From Sunday at 12:15 until Sunday at 10:45 next week, we have no idea how many opportunities we have to share Christ's love. But I think you'll agree with me. They're there. Every day. Every day. Most of you remember the movie Schindler's List. A great, great great movie. And it chronicled the heroic efforts of a German industrialist during World War II named Oskar Schindler. And through his unbelievably unselfish activity, over 1,000 Jews that were on trains heading to Auschwitz were saved. After Schindler found out what was happening at Auschwitz, he began a systematic effort to save as many Jews as he could. And he was fortunate. He had resources. He could buy Jews to work in his factory. And his factory was supposed to be a part of the massive military machine of the Nazis. So on one hand, he was buying as many Jews as he could, and on the other hand, he was making materiel for the war. But here's the kicker. The materiel that he was making was sabotaged. It didn't work. He put it out into the field with the German armies, and it exploded in their faces. It malfunctioned. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. He entered the war a financially wealthy person, but by the end of the war, he was bankrupt. When the Germans surrendered, Schindler met with his workers and told them, at midnight, my friends, you are free to go. And the most emotional scene in that whole show, and I would urge you, sometime soon, watch Schindler's List. Be ready to cry, I'm going to tell you, but be ready to have a really good understanding. Anyway, the emotional scene toward the end of it was when he said goodbye to the financial manager of his plant, who was a Jew, and he was a good and trusted friend. And as he embraces this friend, this financial manager, Schindler looks beyond the head of the friend, and there is Schindler's car. And Schindler looks at it, and it strikes him, why do I need that car? Why did I need that car? And he says, I could have done more. He looked at that automobile, and he said, why didn't I sell this? I could have bought 10 more Jews and helped them live. Taking another small possession that he had, he cried out, this would have saved another one. Why didn't I do more? Oskar Schindler had a heart for serving and saving others. And that's what true greatness is all about. At the end of the movie, and it will blow you away. At the end of the movie, many of the Jews that Schindler had saved gathered for his funeral and his burial. And at the end, they buried Schindler, and you see many Jewish people stacking stones on the grave. Just a random stack of stones. It's a Jewish tradition. And you know what those stones symbolize? They symbolize that the memory of that man will never be blown away by the wind. Folks, no act of kindness that any Christian, you, Grace St. Luke's, Immaculate Conception, any Christian can do, none of them will ever be blown away. Your acts of kindness will never be forgotten. James and John, Jimmy and John, can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with? And then a few sentences later he says, you will drink the cup I drink and you will be baptized with the baptism, but to sit at my right hand or my left hand is not for me to grant. That prophecy came true. Tradition tells us that James was the first apostle to be martyred, and John was the last to die after enduring years and years of persecution. I guess at that point they didn't know what they were asking for. But the good news is they never turned back. And we can thank God that they did not turn back, because think of the critical role they played